Hello, welcome to TSR. This is Jake Rahutsky in for Josh Peck. We've got a very special guest with us today. I have with me right now Richard Shaw. He's an expert in the Torah codes. Helped produce a film here a while back on the Torah codes, and so today we're going to be talking about the Torah codes and how they correlate with the upcoming election. It's going to be a fascinating show. If you're out there watching right now, please join us in the chat room. We're going to be answering questions and addressing basically any questions you guys have or any feedback you guys have. So please join us there. Thank you for joining me today, Richard.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I mean, I got to meet James yesterday, and we had a little audio problem, so I appreciate that we're redoing the show and also giving people a chance to ask questions.
Awesome, awesome, man. So take us back a little bit, Richard. For the people that don't know, just give us the quick foundation behind the Torah codes and how you got involved with that.
Sure, no, I'd be happy to do that. Back in the late 90s, a book came out from a guy named Michael Drosnin. He wrote a book called The Bible Code. On the front cover of that book was this table, and it said, Yitzhak Rabin, assassin will assassinate. I bought the book and read it on the way home. I was out in Hollywood working on a project and was living in Atlanta at the time. This was a long time ago. Now I'm talking to you from LA pretty much. But I was so intrigued by his findings and learned about all of these rabbis and professors that were involved with it. And but it wasn't until about 2006 where I had a discussion with a friend of mine named Lee, and I said, it'd be really interesting to do a documentary someday about the Bible codes, but I said I would prefer to call them the Torah codes because that's really where the codes are. And at that point, he ended up by total random sitting on a plane next to a guy on the way back to visit his brother in New York, and this guy happened to be Professor Robert Herelick from City University in New York. And Robert was one of the men that was actually writing computer code to search the Torah and knew all the world experts. And suddenly I was connected and didn't really have to do anything. It was really kind of a bizarre occurrence. And a few months after that, I was able to meet Professor Rips and Rabbi Glezerson, who were just happened to be in Los Angeles for a couple conventions, and uh, we were able to meet together, and so I was able to get firsthand information and find out what these men were actually like. Well, it took several years to uh, learn about what they were doing and get the budget together to actually do the first film. It's called Torah Codes End to Darkness, where I had to go to Israel and to New York to interview these guys. And so it's been 10 years since those days, and uh, it's been an amazing experience, and I'm always kind of feel honored to be a part of their research and find out what they're doing, and we collaborate and send each other emails all the time. So one of the things that happened recently is everybody has been asking, well, have you done Torah codes about Trump and about Hillary? And so we finally have those, and some of it was because of the work that Rabbi Glazerson is doing, who spends a lot of time. He usually is working on tables every day of his life. But then this time I also got a couple tables unannounced from Professor Rips himself, who's generally considered the discoverer of the Torah codes, and worked with two other men back in the late 70s. One of them was Doron Whitstam, and the other was Yoav Rosenberg. These were like computer programmers, and between the three of them, they came up with a method on how to search the Torah. Now, if this all sounds incredible or either ridiculous or incredible, the Torah is really a mathematical equation. The whole set of 5 books, the Torah is basically the books from Genesis to Deuteronomy, and there are encodings in those books that you can find simply by counting with your finger. And this was discovered in the early 50s by another mathematician by the name of Weissmandel. And he went in there and started counting letters with his finger because he had the idea that perhaps this was true. So he counted from the first letter tet and skipped every 50 letters, and it spelled out the word Torah. Now that was in the book of Genesis. So then he does it again in the book of Exodus, and it spells out Torah again. So then he tries it in the book of Leviticus, and it doesn't work. And in that book, he realized that if he used every 8 letters, it spelled the word Hashem, which is kind of the Jewish name for God, the God of no name. Well, he kept doing this, and he ended up with, in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, he discovered that it said Torah, Torah, God, then a mirror image Torah, and mirror image Torah. And all of that was just by counting with his fingers. So that has always kind of intrigued me, like that's a big clue that there would be this encoding in there that's easy enough just to find it by counting with your fingers. So when they came out with computers, they started to put actual words in. Well, what about Hitler? What about some of the famous rabbis through history? Because these are Jewish men. They're going to look up rabbis. So one of the men they looked up was one of the first searches that Professor Rips did was the Vilna Gaon, who lived back in the 1700s. And all of his information appeared in the Torah codes. It's really unbelievable. So now we have this method by which the codes come up looking kind of like a crossword puzzle in the software, and words come up vertically, horizontally, sideways, and we're getting information now about things that are happening today, events, people, places, times. All of those things seem to be encoded in the Torah. So what I thought I might do is show you the tables that we've come up with for Trump and Hillary, and I'll start with by first sharing the screen here, and bear with me because it's the first time I've used this software. So let's see here. All right, are you with me there?
Yes, I am.
This is a table that I've showed people before, but I thought it was so intriguing that I'm using it kind of to start out the conversation. Back last year, this was an election that had to do with President Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. And so Rabbi Glazerson looked up his name and the correct wording and everything, and he came up with this table. And if you can see my cursor here, it says Netanyahu will be elected. Over here it says Bibi, it's what all of his friends call him, short for Benjamin, in 5775. This is the Hebrew calendar way of revealing the year. That means 2015. And then down here it says on the 26th of Adar. That correlates to the Gregorian calendar of March 17th, the day that the election happened on. And basically all that information was there. Now, this table was sent to me around the second week of February, if I remember right. So it was a little over a month before the election actually occurred, I got this table. Now, the mainstream media and most of the press were saying it's going to be a really tight race. Netanyahu may not win, but then I had this table that I had received from Glazerson, where indeed it looked like he was going to win, and actually he did. He won by a landslide. So now we have the situation with Hillary and with Trump, where we have new tables that have come in. So let me start with that. One of the things that happened was in 2008, there were tables that were found for McCain and Obama. And they looked up the same words, which is like in this table. Could there be a table that was Hillary? But let me get like even the more simple one here. We'll start with the simpler table. this says, and I can't see if this is filling your screen correctly. Are we okay?
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. It's not.
How
There you
about
go.
that?
That's better. That's better.
Okay, because there was some things up on the screen, windows yesterday, and I couldn't see them where they were on your end, so
Right.
I was just guessing where to put this, but I can do that so you can see it a little better. So what we decided to do was to seeing that we're not trying to use the Torah like a crystal ball or look into the future or do anything like that. But what we can do is comparisons. We can look up the same words for Hillary and for Trump and see which tables appear to be the strongest. And what we mean by that is if the p-value is greater, the probability value statistically on the table, or if there are things that make the table seemingly more important. For example, like if all the words are in parallel rows, or if they're close to each other, or if they're touching each other, the idea that that's going to occur is less random than if words are just scattered all over the page. So, so we did both of them. There's Hillary president in the U.S. and then will be elected over to the right here, and so that was discovered. Now this isn't a particularly tight sentence. Will be elected. There's a lot of space between these letters, but still, all of the keywords are there. But what I got a couple of days ago from Professor Rips was this table, and everyone knows there's these scandals breaking now about Hillary because of the WikiLeaks information that's come through. And if you can see this, in fact, I can kind of go like this. You can see that when Professor Rips does a table, he tries to keep things very tight and in parallel rows. And this is the idea that this could just be random chance. It would be many hundreds of thousands to one. So down here it says what these words mean. We have the green letters and then the red. That means really corrupted. That's Hebrew for really corrupted. And then up here in the blue with the white letters is the word Hillary, all tightly compacted together, and crossing that is the word foundation. So it's it's basically, this is referring to the Clinton Foundation, really corrupted. So then he did another one, and of today, and even Josh sent this to me too, as far as what's going on today with the FBI. But when I communicated with Professor Rips about Comey's not indicting Hillary for her leaking of the email documents, he looked at this table. Now, I didn't ask him to do this. He just thought it was important. He was concerned with what's happening here in America and created this table and sent it to me. And basically we have here in the dark blue, which is down here at the bottom, Comey covers up, which is really specific. Up here in red, the red letters, is the word Hillary. And then what's
So
really amazing is this line right here. If you can see this okay, are you with me there?
yeah, yeah, I'm with you.
If I
Yes.
if I blow this up, I mean it says in the yellow, which are is in there, and then the tan letters here is for the mail. Comey covers up for the mail, Hillary, and then the rest of this is servers and making use by their foundation. And what's so fascinating about this, it's because all of the letters are intertwined and shared together. I mean, it's all in one vertical row,
Yeah.
and yet all that information is encoded. And so I've often said to people, like, in the book of Daniel, it says, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Well, we've all been reading biblical texts in the Torah and in the minor prophets and everything else for thousands of years. So how in the world do you seal up a book until the time of the end? And it seems to make sense by today's technology that you would encrypt it, which is no big deal for us today. Emails are encrypted,
Right.
secret information is encrypted, and it hasn't been until just a few decades ago that we have the ability to decrypt it and know what it is and be able to read this information, which to me keeps me interested in the Torah codes, that this kind of information in such detail could actually be in there.
So, real quick, Richard, before we go too much further, just so I understand a little bit better, you have to know what you're looking for before you start looking, correct? It's not just
Yes,
like, okay,
it's not like a lot of people, and people will write me, "Can you look my name up?" And it's like, well, this isn't Google, guys. I mean, it's because we're talking about, millions of things that could be in there, names, duplicate names, and everything else. You have to have things that reference them. In fact, when we do look up a name, like we had a request by George Norrie, the host of Coast to Coast AM, if you ever listen to his show at night.
yes, I have.
George is a good friend of mine, and I appreciate him very much. And this man came on. He called in late and said, you know, could could the Torah could the Torah codes be the book of life? And this is something I had talked about with Rabbi Glazerson. Could it be possible that all of the names of people in the book of life are already encoded? I mean, it would be ironic indeed to say that, that's the case. So at that question, I said, we don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me if God decided to do something like that. So he goes, I'd like you to look up my name. So I was able to convince the rabbis and professors to do that. And they came up with 5 or 6 tables of George Norrie. Incredible detail. I mean, I can't begin to tell you the kind of detail that was in there, because Professor Rips found this one sentence about George Norrie, and it said, other than just the normal stuff, radio broadcaster in the USA, which we all knew he is, but it said, loves the paranormal but clear cut. And that's kind of like in one sentence spelled out his whole personality. Now, I don't know how Professor Rips decided to look for those words, but they were all in that Torah code table. And it took them 3 weeks to find this information. So it's labor intensive to do
Right.
this.
So, I mean, so these names are showing up in there, but they already know what to look for. There's probably a lot of code deciphering that we haven't even discovered yet, simply because it hasn't happened. So
Well,
it's almost
exactly.
it's almost like a fail safe for the Word of God to still confirm itself without giving everything away.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, I mean, it's been criticized. Some people have said, "Oh, this is divination. This is occult practices. This is like talking to the dead." It's none of those things. It's just mathematics. That's all it
Hmm.
is. All through the scriptures, we have references to, there was 40 days, or it was, you know, 1,050 of this or that, and it was like there's all of these things are very detailed all through scriptures. The dimensions of the holy city, how many days Yeshua was going to be in the tomb before. I mean, all of these things are very descriptive, and so there's another form of codes that is called gematria, and that has been in use longer than the Torah codes. But gematria is basically just where each Hebrew character is given a number, and you'll read about this in Scripture. It'll say, "Oh, and it was his name, and it was the number of his name." Now, all the Jews know what that means because they've done this for decades, and yet all of that is in there too. So we have gematria of some of the same information, but it's a different way of finding it.
Interesting. So it gives us a glimpse into the near future if we know what to look for, but there's no way to predict far off future events because we simply do not know what to look for.
We don't know what to look for. Now, occasionally, they've stumbled onto information that actually happens. It's random. It's not intentional.
Yeah.
Sometimes they get an idea like, wow, what, we need to know about this. Could it possibly be in the Torah codes? And they put all these words in to see if it's in a table, and if they all appear, then, especially if there's a date that's given, then that becomes really significant. So let
So,
me, you want me to show you some more of these tables, or?
yeah, can I just ask one more question before you do?
Oh,
I
please
just
do.
just to give people a better understanding of how technology is helping. If someone were to try and do this without a computer, what kind of work would it take to decipher, say, one of these codes?
Well, some of you wouldn't be able to do because you wouldn't know where to start in which book to begin
Hmm.
looking in the first letter of what book. Uh, some of the words, if they're really hard to find, basically span all five books. You'll find like long sentences sometimes that start in the book of Genesis and end in Deuteronomy, and yet the word is all there. Those are like really large skips. We try to avoid really large skips like that, but nevertheless, they appear sometimes. So,
Interesting.
you know,
Okay, so go ahead. You were going to show us some more, so go ahead and do your.
yeah, let's do the Trump and Hillary tables because I know
Okay.
people probably want to see these. Now, Glayerson came over to my house uh, less than a month ago, I think it's been. I got to get us back into screen share mode.
And while he's doing that, guys in the chat room, if you have questions, you can hammer some questions out, and we'll ask them here in a little bit. Except if you want to know if your name is in the Torah codes, just pass on that one because he's already kind of addressed that. So
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a I need a lot of information to do it, and it's time intensive for the rabbis to do it. So here's one that Glazerson and I worked on while he was here uh, just a few weeks ago, and this was something that we had seen. Is that can you see that better on your end?
yes, yes, we can see it.
This is basically Hillary sick. Now this is all you can tell. Like the spacing between all of these letters is the same. The skip is the same for this sentence. Off to the right it says with infection. And in Hebrew, their words for pneumonia is a lung infection. That's how they classify the word pneumonia. That's what the word means in Hebrew. So over here you have with infection, and off to the left here you have the word lungs. And then you have the date 776, which is implied 2016. And then down here the woman just happened to be, with all the letters are lined up like that, that means it's in the plain text. It's in the non-encoded text that just happened to be in that particular page.
And she
The
was having all those coughing fits.
Yeah, and it was basically came out in the press that she had pneumonia, walking
Mm-hmm.
pneumonia. This is when that episode happened where she collapsed at the curb as she was getting into her van. And you remember seeing that video. So
Yeah.
we discovered that that was all that information was in the Torah codes. But then what we also found was something which was a little darker. And this was a table that came out. Uh, I'll try to make it as big as I can without going off the screen. And we showed this in a little video on my YouTube Pinlight site. But basically, all in one sentence, Rabbi Glazerson found this. What is their heart? United States, the abomination unto the Lord. And crossing that in the middle, they are defiled. Now, they are defiled is actually in the plain text, and it crosses through the encoded text. Occasionally this happens. It's not planned that way. It just happens that way. Then down here at the bottom, in the plain text, touching this sentence, it says, cursed will be the taker of bribery. And then off here to the left, it says Hillary and Obama, which cross basically perpendicularly to this entire sentence. And then what I thought was the most astonishing thing in this table, which kind of takes it out of the realm of just being random chance, down here in the plain text in Deuteronomy, which is listed here, Deuteronomy 17, verse 1, an abomination unto the Lord thy God. So basically, it says the same thing in the plain text as it does in the encoded text above it, with the year given 2016, 776. But what's that? I think your mic is muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I said interesting.
Yeah.
Very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that are.
The abomination, an abomination unto the Lord. Huh. So, Richard, I've got a question from someone in the chat room if you're willing to address it at this point.
Yeah, please.
They were asking, has the Torah codes brought any rabbis to Christ so far?
Uh, well, you have to understand that these rabbis are brought up in Judaism. And so they're really not looking for Yeshua in the Torah codes. They're looking at things that impact Israel. That's what they normally do. However, Rabbi Glazerson knows that I'm a Christian, and the fact that we are such good friends is kind of a miracle to me, and I've always cherished that relationship. And so what I think is interesting is that I think there's a more openness to why we believe certain things. But I understand why they don't, too, because they're basically the Torah to the Jews is the most important thing in the whole Bible. It was like the actual Word of God given to them on Mount Sinai. They revere that to almost to the exclusion sometimes of other biblical texts. And so in the commandments, the first commandment says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." So to them, that's what they're trying to do. So what I'm hopeful of is that we can bridge that gap between Christians and Jews and try to understand why they believe what they believe, and that they would become more interested in why we think Yeshua is the Messiah. But to them, that's a really hard one for them to swallow.
Right.
Let me go to the next one here.
This is amazing stuff.
Yeah, this is our first Trump table. And this one is okay, but I don't know how significant it is, except for the fact there's a lot of information in it, more than the Hillary table on her electoral possibilities. The thing I don't like about this table is that the word Trump is way off to the side and kind of off here to the left. I can't determine how significant that is, but yet over here, if you can see this okay, and tell me if you can't see something and I'll
No,
rearrange
we can see it just fine.
Off to the right here, we have the year, 5777, which is this year. And it gives us the Hebrew calendar month of Chesvan, which is November the 8th. It's the 7th of Chesvan is the day of our election. That is November 8th for us. And that comes up both ways. Right here it says the U.S. President. And down here it says Donald will be elected. All in this one sentence. And it says down here, interesting, lover of Israel, which we know is true, because Donald Trump has relatives who are even studying Judaism. I mean, it's really he's quite connected with Israel, and doesn't like what he sees going on. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
So the conclusion here from that slide, it says Trump will be elected U.S. president. Is that what you gather?
Yeah, but it also said Hillary will be elected president too. Here's hers.
Can you go back to the Hillary? Okay.
Yeah, this is Hillary. Now it says, this is one I don't think I showed you yet. This one says Hillary will be elected in 5777. That's kind of stretched out. 5777, I do my best to try to label these, but this year starts down here, if you can see my arrow, and goes up like that. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
That's 5777 stretched out. Then you have the word Clinton, which is the red. You have president over here. Hillary will be elected, U.S. And then here in the plain text, running through the name Clinton, we have the word Amalekite. Now, that's kind of like an Old Testament term. If you've ever read the book of Esther, you know that Haman, who was kind of like the villain of the story, was an Amalekite. So all through history, the Jews have basically referred to Amalek as someone that basically is like a villain or is wicked or not someone that they really want to see to be president. Now, yet there's others in Israel who are very supportive of Hillary Clinton. There's a kind of a left-wing group in Israel that is gaining stature there, which tends to worry me quite a bit. But that's true.
So could this be interpreted maybe as that they will be elected to run for U.S. president? That's someone who is asking that question, or is it? I mean, because how would you decipher that if it says they're both going to be president?
Right.
And it's got this year. That doesn't make any sense.
It's because it's like what I was saying earlier, and everyone asks about this. It's the same phenomena that occurred back in 2008 when tables were created for Obama and for McCain. They both said he will be elected. But the one that proved to be the tightest and had the most information in it was Obama. So let me show you the second Trump table. All we can do is make comparisons
Right.
and see what those mean. Now this is the second Trump table, which I think beats the Hillary table. It says Donald Trump. Now this Trump isn't like off to the side, and this one's
It's close,
right in
yeah.
the middle. It says lover of Israel in the U.S. Now all of that information is clustered in this little spot. In fact, the word Donald runs right through that. And then up here it says will be elected. It's tight up against this other line of text. And then down here it's very specific. In the second month, which means we just had a new year in Israel in September, so actually it was the second, I believe it was the 2nd of October, if I remember correctly, when their new year started. So this November is the second month for them. And that came up in the code tables. And then down here it says to the U.S. in 5777, the president. And then down here at the bottom, just like in the other table, you can see this down here at the bottom, it says chess fan November 8th. So that's pretty much all the information about the election. So to me, I felt this was pretty interesting. I felt like it had quite a bit of accurate information in it. Then I have one more. It's the third Trump table. We did 3. And this is, again, Donald Trump, U.S., 5777. And then all of this was kind of neatly spaced. Will be elected president on November 8th.
And that Cheshvan just means November 8th, right?
Right. That's the,
Okay.
like I'm saying, that's the Hebrew month, which to us means November 8th. And all that information is in the table. So, I don't know. After I've looked at all of these, it seems like Trump has a really good chance. They're neck and neck, but it looks like there's more information in the tables on Trump than there is on Hillary.
Right. So I guess my question would be, and what is your? I know you're just looking at the information and trying to decipher, but what would be your interpretation if the codes say that both people will be president, but maybe one looks stronger? Is this a situation where the die is not cast until his people pray? Like maybe it's open for. I mean, what's your take on that?
I think anything like that is possible. I mean, I wouldn't want to use this as a predictive tool. In fact, Professor Rips has put out kind of a white paper saying that he didn't feel like we knew enough about the codes yet to use them to make predictions. There's layers and layers of data in the codes. I mean, there's other tables that we have in here that I could show you that where we've done.
Sure. Can I ask you a question as we're moving to those next tables?
Yeah.
Okay, so Daniel asked, he said, has there been any searches for disasters or major events?
Oh, constantly. Glazerson has 5,000 tables that he's done. He's done so many of them. There are many books that I have. I can't remember all of them because
Right.
they're just, it's an insane amount of work. And, like, let me switch screens again here and I'll show you some more stuff. I'm just sorry for the delay. I'm just trying to find all this
Yeah, that's fun.
material. Okay, we're back to my screen here. I'm going to put this one away. Here's one that Glazerson found just for my company. And I've showed this one recently, but I hadn't shown it until just recently. He looked up the name Pinlight. It's up there every 4 letters. Pinlight is my company name. Down here it says 5776. That's 2016. That's the year we're in right now. And then over here, 5775 was the year that our film was released, which was last year. And over here it says TORAH code, right in a vertical line, just no spaces between it or anything. And then down here, which I thought was really cool, it says, "We'll show to the world the deeds of God." And then over here we have ephod twice. Now, this started because we had asked Glazerson. In fact, this idea for this stemmed back to a dinner that we all went to. Rabbi Glazerson and L.A. Marzulli and I went to dinner. This was, about 4 years ago. And L.A. said, "Has anyone looked up the ephod in the Torah codes?" Because he was talking about the Urim and the Thummim, which is like the perfect lights, the Jews call it, which basically people don't realize that in those days you could ask the ephod a question and the stones on the breastplate would light up with an encoded answer. And could the Torah codes be the modern ephod? So Glazerson started looking it up and it just appeared like all over the place. And along with the words Torah code. So we think that this may be a way for us to find encoded information in the current Hebrew text that we have of the Torah, which is kind of an interesting thing. Are you following me?
Yes, yes, I am.
This is something that also, you're familiar with the whole Planet X phenomenon, Nibiru and all of
Right,
that.
Nibiru, yes, planet Nibiru.
That is also something that the rabbis study quite a bit because in their ancient mystical texts, at the time of the Messiah, they expect to see some kind of astronomical event occur. Now, in the Christian text, it talks about signs in the sky, and there'll be the sun will be darkened, and the moon turned to blood, and all these things that Yeshua talks about in the Book of Matthew, as well as tons of other references all through the Bible. There's really more in the Bible about that time, the end of days, than any other thing, any other biblical prophecy. But in the Hebrews mystical text, they have a book called the Midrash. They have something called the Zohar. They also have other texts that they use to look these things up. So they all believe that in those days there will be other beings appear. I mean, that's why they think that UFOs is no big deal, because that's part of what they believe will happen. That there will also be this planetary body that appears. And so in this text it says, in the end of days, Nibiru, and this here, the yellow is the plain text, and the plain text is in numbers, and it says, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel." Now, down here it says in 5776, so that's this year, and then in here it says a warning. Now, if you remember right, there was a comment way earlier this year that came out and said we found what we think is a large planet on the edge of our solar system.
Yeah.
And that was something that NASA actually came out and said. And they haven't seen it yet, but they know it's out there. So the text says, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. It's almost too literal. I just thought that was a really interesting table.
Huh.
No, this shows how sometimes some of these tables can get really complicated.
What on average, just to give us a better idea, Richard, what would you say statistically? Like how, I guess to wrap my head around it, I just have to have a better understanding of the statistics. Is it always 1,000 to 1 on these
Oh, no.
possibilities? Is it more than that? Like
Well, yeah, I don't know if I have.
just ballpark, if you can just give us kind of a better idea of like,
It depends on the table. I mean,
okay.
Professor Rips did one on 9/11,
Hmm.
the 9/11 thing. I'm trying to see if I have that handy here. I can just show it to you. Actually, it might be in. I have like a lot of this stuff on this computer. He did one that. Hang on here. Might be in my graphics folder. And it's in the film that we did. Here we go. I think it's in here.
Someone asked if Nibiru is
Here.
associated with wormwood, and I was just going to answer that real quick. Yes, Nibiru is associated with wormwood. Doug Elwood actually wrote a book about, or I'm sorry, Elwell, not Elwood, wrote a book about this, talking about how he believes that wormwood is actually a comet and part of debris that's going to come off outside of planet Nibiru. I mean, at least that's the theory. But go ahead, Richard. Go back to
No,
this table here.
there's a lot of things, Doug. I have that book too. There's a lot of things that he says that I think I tend to agree with Doug's hypothesis that Nibiru is the sign of this coming of the Son of Man, is why all of the earth shall mourn, according to Matthew 24. I tend to believe that. I don't think wormwood. I don't think Nibiru is going to crash into the earth because the earth would be
Well,
destroyed. It would have to be an asteroid or a
right. What
particle.
what what he is saying, basically, what he theorizes in his book that he wrote is that wormwood is a biological component here on Earth that's found that actually can cause people to hallucinate and even die. Right? It's like a poison, and he believes that biological matter was cast into space during the creation event or during the flood event. Right? And
Yeah.
so what's going to happen is this debris, the original flood event happened when Nibiru was here last time. And so as it comes back around, now it's got all this biological matter. And there's actually a huge comet, he believes, that has wormwood. Basically, it's just surrounding this comet. It's nothing but just like wormwood all around it. And so literally when it hits the ocean, that wormwood, the biological component on it, is actually going to poison the ocean and kill the fish, that it's like a literal thing. That's his theory. But anyways,
Well, there is a scripture in the Talmud
right,
written by
yes.
the Sanhedrin that says, in the end of days, when Messiah will not come until a fish cannot be found to feed a sick person. And it's an interesting little note that's in there. Something has to kill all the fish. Now, right now, we've got this Fukushima radiation where a lot of the
Right.
Pacific Ocean has been affected by that. And then we had the Deepwater Horizon spill, which has
Yes.
really hurt the Gulf. So I mean, we've had things that where suddenly we come to the conclusion that it could actually be possible. But you were asking about probability just a second
Right.
ago, so I wanted to find this particular table because it's really emblematic on what that is. This is one that Professor Rips found, and I've showed this before, and it's in my film, Torah Codes Into Darkness, because I thought it was so amazing. But just out of the Hebrew newspaper, he found these words: Twin Towers airplane attack. Them up. They all appeared in Numbers chapter 20. All these words encoded. There they are in this tiny little table. If you count all of the letters in this table, there's 234 letters. The probability of finding all of this in such a short space is 1 in 10 million. Now, they've run the tests on this, and that's what they've come up with. 1 in 10 million. Here's the same words found in a monkey text or just a random Hebrew text. And as you can see, they all come up. All of the words are there, but it's just completely insignificant. I mean, there's 7,772 letters in this table, so you can't really look at that as having, it's just an accident that occurred, whereas this is intentional. And one thing that Professor Rips did at one time, he printed out the entire book of Numbers on a tractor feed printer and showed that it comes all the way down. There was like one little word, in like chapter 17 or something, but everything ended up in this one chapter, chapter 20. Now, what are the odds of that? It's just, it's amazing. So they're not all of that kind of odds, but here's another really good one that shows that this is more than just random chance. This is another Twin Towers table. It says Twins Towers Massacre, September 11th, the terror attack. And all of these encoded texts appeared over the plain text that says, and fell from the people this day around 3,000 men. I mean, so if we'd have known what to look up, this was encoded in that book, 3,000 years ago. It's just it's mind-boggling at times that kind of information could come up.
Interesting.
We had other tables in here too. Let me see if I have anything else that's... Well, the Bin Laden table, this is a famous one. It's happened a long time ago, but I still think it's amazing. All these words: destruction, I will name you, cursed is Bin Laden, and revenge belongs to the Messiah. All with the same skip.
Interesting.
And all in the same sentence.
So, I mean, it sounds like from what you found so far in these most recent tables, Trump is mentioned a lot more. So, if we were going to make a guess based off of what the Torah codes say today, my guess would be that it's indicating that Trump is in fact going to be the next elected president. But I guess time will only tell. And this isn't a perfect science, yeah.
Right. I think he has a good chance of it. We can't believe the mainstream media's polls. I mean, everybody knows that.
Yeah. Well, the Bernie situation, my understanding is there were tons and tons of votes that were stolen. So, I know voter fraud happens. I think it happens on both sides. I think our system is just so corrupt that, it's hard to put lots of trust in either one of them.
I think
Honestly.
this is why I think this is the whole reason for the popularity of Donald Trump, because he stands outside of this whole cesspool that's going on in Washington, and he's not intimidated by it because he has so much wealth. No one can buy him off, and he just can say anything that pops into his mind, and has. But the things he said lately, the things that he wants to do, are, have brought tears to many of our eyes. I mean, because it's almost like listening to someone a few decades ago about America and what we should be doing. But the only thing that I think could keep it from happening is, just in my opinion, and if we are in the latter times, this is the end of days, and we know things have to get really bad, and will continue to get bad. I think the situation that's happening in Syria is all contrived, and I think that Obama has inflamed it by his actions. with against what Putin is trying to do there, and has really outraged the whole situation and inflamed it. He's basically trying to topple Assad, and Putin's trying to keep him in power so that it's just not complete anarchy in Syria. But we also have the Isaiah 17 prophecy that says that Damascus will be destroyed. It'll become a ruinous heap. Well, we don't know the entire situation in Damascus. According to my friend Dan Gordon, parts of it still are standing and parts of it have been destroyed. Aleppo, we know, is almost completely destroyed. And you can go on YouTube and see drone footage that's just apocalyptic looking. I mean, it looks like something out of a major battle from some Hollywood movie, but it's real. And little kids are running through the rubble, through the streets.
Yeah.
And the place is like completely crumbling and not even livable. And then we have Hamas, and we have Hezbollah that has 200,000 rockets aimed towards Israel. And Netanyahu had this thing going with Putin. He had a fairly good relationship where he could go in and bomb Hezbollah sites without, getting Putin upset for doing that. And that was working because Netanyahu knows that all of these missiles are pointed at Israel, and there are also hundreds and perhaps thousands of rockets that have been built again in the Gaza Strip, all aimed at Israel. This time, if they do anything, I think that Israel will basically wipe them off the map. I really do.
Yeah, well, there's a place in Scripture that talks about a desert, desolate wasteland. It might be in Ezekiel, but basically talks about how there are neither birds nor basically there's no living thing, no animal. The land is uninhabitable. And a lot of people speculate that that is somewhere in the Middle East, and that somebody's going to tangle with Israel that's going to end up on the wrong side of a nuke.
Well, there is actually a reference to Gaza, and let me find it real quick here. I just don't have it up. I can get it.
Well, while you're looking for that, Doug, I'll just ask you too. In regards to Russia and future war or anything like that, I know you said there's thousands of these, and you probably couldn't remember all of them. But do you remember seeing anything about future war with Russia or any type of conflict with them?
Well, we have tables that talk about Iran. I think what we're all looking at is the Ezekiel 38 war.
Right.
And yet Rabbi Glazerson thinks we're in that section in Psalm 2, where it says, "Why do the nations rage? Why is everybody?" I mean, this is what he thinks it is. But here's that passage that I was trying to find for you. I just wanted to quote it correctly. Sorry, it just takes me a second.
You talking about the uninhabitable wasteland we were talking about?
No, this is about where is it? It's in Zephaniah. It basically talks about Gaza and the people that live nearby the ocean and how it will be, and I'm against you, says the Lord. And that he's going to basically wipe them out. This isn't really the wipe. I didn't know we were going to talk about this.
No, that's okay.
But it's in there.
I know it seems to be the agenda has been to push everything back from the Gaza Strip and take more and more away from Israel. And Obama wants to divide the nation of Israel into a two-state.
Even worse is what UNESCO is plotting right now, to take away the Western Wall from the Jews and give it to the Muslims right on the Temple Mount. Those kind of things are really, it's almost unbelievable to me that this is happening, because this is obviously Jewish land, and they keep finding artifacts from antiquity.
Someone just put in the chat Isaiah 17 verse 3 is talking about the destruction of Damascus.
Yeah, that's what I had just mentioned a minute ago.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. We know that, and we don't know if Damascus is completely destroyed now or not. But it's interesting that it's happening, and no doubt will be destroyed. The rest of it, we don't know when or how. We know that, like I was saying, we know that part of it has been destroyed, and Aleppo apparently has totally been destroyed.
Hmm. Interesting.
And
Well,
it's weird that all of these ancient prophecies are happening now, but they seem to be happening.
so what is it that you're working on right now, Richard? I know you guys produced this film. Are you in the middle of any other projects right now that you can talk about with us?
Well, we just finished. I was working with L.A. Marzulli. We finished Watchers 10, and we also did a rebuttal about the ferry
Right.
that Jaime Maussan did, and we just put out about a 45-minute piece that shows that it was a fake and went into great detail in proving that it was, which was kind of interesting to me because it was so realistic. I don't know if you've seen the fairy piece.
Yeah, I saw the pictures of it. It definitely had me curious. When I saw the photos, I was like, this
Yeah,
is crazy. What is this thing?
when we first saw this, it was 2013 in Jaime Maussan's studios, and he brings this thing out in a bottle of formaldehyde and lifts it up, and I had no idea what this thing was. And I took a lot of pictures of it and video, and yet he didn't want to show it to anybody yet because they hadn't finished doing any studies on it. Well, a couple years went by, and I had dinner with Jaime in Los Angeles, and I said, "Can we finally show what this thing is?" And he asked for our help if we could help him, test it. And we said, "Yeah, we'd be happy to do that." But that meant that we had to bring the ferry into the States, which is no small undertaking. You can't go on a plane with a liter of formaldehyde in a glass bottle
Why
and send.
not? What's the big deal?
Yeah,
It's a nice frosty beverage.
yeah, exactly. So that had to be driven all the way from Mexico City into Los Angeles, which is about the same distance of driving from Chicago to LA,
Hmm.
and on the Pan American Highway. And we had one of Jaime's friends do that, and got it through customs without a problem. And basically, we took it to the lab that was at the Agora Hills Animal Hospital, where they work on pets and everything, which was a great place because we could pull this thing out of the jar and put it under the X-ray and get fresh new X-rays and really examine it. And as we're looking at it, it started to deteriorate because at some point, and we don't know when this was, they had changed the fluid in the bottle from formaldehyde to alcohol, and now it was drying out for the first time in years. And as it was doing that, some of the pieces of it, the skin, were shrinking, and it exposed these little wooden parts that we'd never seen because they had been covered with skin that was glued to them. And we realized that the upper shoulders to the arms that were on it were actually made out of this wood and covered with some animal skin that was glued to it, and now it was coming apart.
So someone did a brilliant job of manufacturing
Oh, it
this
was
thing.
huge amount of effort went into it, and it was made up of several different animals. We took it to a taxidermist, basically an expert at the Santa Barbara History Museum, and he had bones from all these other creatures and compared them and laid them up there. It's in the film, and it's free. You can watch it on pinlight.com if you'd like to see it. And basically, it was built from a bat and probably a stillborn head of a monkey, and the ears were glued on, and the face was beefed up so it would look a little different, and we were all kind of dumbfounded at the work that went into making this little creature.
Sounds like someone missed their calling in special effects film studios or something like that. But
Well, some people think that they did this to humiliate Jaime. I'm not so sure
mhm.
that's the reason, because Jaime, I know him personally. He's a really good guy. He's an honest man. He's not someone to foist a hoax on someone knowingly. He wouldn't do that for money or for any reason. Uh, I think they just did it because they felt like he would buy it if he found something that was unexplainable and then use it on his show in Mexico. And he had recently purchased another little creature they called the Peck creature, which is a very small little skeletal creature that we're not sure what it is. And he had paid a pretty penny for that little sample, and so they made this thing, which really got his attention. And he was on vacation when they brought it in. And his staff said, "You got to see this, Jaime. This is really, we don't know what this is." And it was a couple years after he got it is when we saw it for the first time.
Interesting.
And it
Interesting.
looked so much like the Revelation 9 creature that it talks
Yeah.
about. The scorpions, and they have tails like scorpions and a face like a person. And this thing had all of those attributes, so it was kind of interesting to us.
Uh, well, Richard,
What I
go
was
ahead.
working on, I just was going to quickly
Yeah.
wrap this by saying we're in the process of raising funds to do Torah Codes 2 because there's so much new information out there, and there's a huge effort in Israel by a lot of the rabbis and the Torah Code researchers, especially Rabbi Glazerson, but yet others as well, that are looking up codes and gematria for the Messiah. Now they're looking for the Messiah, uh, and the Christians are looking for Yeshua, and the Muslims are looking for their Mahdi. And what came out recently in WND was an article that Bob Unruh wrote and said that a Muslim cleric had recently come out and said that the Mahdi will be coming in a spaceship with and light up everything, and it would be a big boom and all this when he comes. And so they're expecting something from space to come. The Bible says there's going to be all these things happen, and I think there's going to be a deception involved. I think something's going to happen that will deceive a lot of people, and all these things, as the tapestry unfolds, it's going to get pretty interesting. So that's what we're working on.
Interesting. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, Richard. Where can they go to see all your work? What's the name of your website, or where's the location on the web?
Well, there's a couple places. If you want to see a collection of different things, you can go to pinlight.com. It's pinlight with a pinlight.com. And everything about the Torah codes is at a different website called endtodarkness.com. END2darkness.com. And you can rent the film, buy the film, you can stream it, or you can get a hard copy, you can get Blu-ray or standard def DVD. I mean, it's basically every kind of format you could want, and it's not terribly expensive, and we've done this so a lot of people can do it. That's up there, and including some other videos. On the Pinlight site, I also have a clip about gematria that is a little clip that I found on YouTube, which is really great. If you've ever seen the movie Pi that came out in the late 90s, this
I
rabbi,
believe I did, yeah.
yeah, this rabbi walks into the bar to the guy who's the mathematical expert and shows him all of these things, that the Torah is just a string of numbers, and all these words add up and mean different things. And he goes, oh yeah, and he gets to the point where he's actually found the Fibonacci sequence, which is the golden spiral that the Greeks talk about. And I asked Professor Herlick about that, and he's done some tables on the Fibonacci sequence. And it's basically everything in nature has this spiral shape, and that's in the Torah as well. So it just kind of leaves the hair on your arm standing up a little bit. I just think they did a really great job on that film. So that's on the Pinlight site. You can watch that as well.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us, Richard. This has been really fascinating. It's an honor to meet you, and I look forward to seeing you again whenever you come back to Skywatch. And God bless you. And guys, until next time, this has been the Sharpening Report. This is Jake Radsky in for Josh Peck. Also, check my stuff out at my website listed right under my name there, seekfortruth.org. I've done a lot of interviews on Seek for Truth. and go check that out as well. Please like and subscribe and share this with everybody. This is really fascinating stuff. So till next time, guys, this has been
Thank you,
the
Jake.
Sharpening. Yes, yes. This has been the Sharpening Report.